Good morning, Amy. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Alexis. I am good. I am giggling about the contrast of our clothing choices as you are in a heat wave and it was 40 degrees here in Minnesota. The temperature now is 55. So, there's hope for us. But me and my wool and you and your tank top. How are you?
Yeah, well, I'm enjoying the warmth for sure. I definitely like the warm weather. And yeah, I'm loving spring this year more. I mean, I've always loved spring, but I'm loving it more and more, I think, because we had a warmer spring. So that's kind of nice. And yeah, I'm excited to talk because we're in a shift. There's a lot of shifting energy happening
Yeah.
astrologically. We're shifting out of Taurus season. So yeah, I felt like here, like I was very in tune to as things were blossoming and blooming, like the very like sensual, being aware of all the the sensory experiences around me of Taurus season.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're moving into Gemini season, which is a different. Taurus is a fixed earth sign, and Gemini is a mutable air sign. So it has a quicker pace. And we'll get into all of that. But yeah, we have shifted into Gemini season. The sun moved into Gemini on May 20th. So yeah, I'm excited to dive in and just see what Gemini season holds for us.
What's what?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So the sun moved into Gemini last week where a little Gemini season officially started and we're here for it. We're on it. It was the 20th and it was after 8 p.m. Central Time that shift happened. And giddy up, here we go.
Yeah, and so maybe just we'll like sprinkle the flavor of Gemini as we open, and then we'll dive into the specifics. So Gemini, like I mentioned, it's a mutable air sign, and I'll think of like social butterfly or like this like kind of faster moving. Also the hummingbird. I always think of like the hummingbird when I think of Gemini. Like it's fast moving, but it can be in its highest expression very curious and joyful, and like there's a lot of excitement that can come with Gemini season. In its shadow, it can be like things moving so fast that we can't keep up, like almost like overwhelm and like anxious thoughts and the like, right, like the things feel too fast. And so I think that can be helpful to know that there's a lot of shifting. Not only is it Gemini season, but we'll go into some of the aspects. There's a lot of planets shifting and moving.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you know that this is what we're in, we're just, it's this mutable change energy that you can kind of lean into the curiosity and the play rather than the overwhelm, right? And so when that comes, when you're feeling overwhelmed, you can be like, oh, well, we're in some big change, right? Where things are shifting, moving, and that's okay. It's part of it. Like think about the hummingbird, right? Like moving really fast, but it's enjoying the nectar, right? It's going over here, it's going over here. Yes, it's fast moving, but there can still be like a joy to that. So that's kind of some of the things that come up for Gemini for me.
Yeah. I tend to experience Gemini in its shadow as an inability to make decisions, inability to know where a person stands. Like, what do I believe? In its light, Gemini is this beautiful ability to see many perspectives, like that. The way the hummingbird goes from place to place, it allows it to see many perspectives. And we can lose ourselves in that shadow space of I can see all these perspectives and the tendency to I can defend all the perspectives. But well, where do you personally stand? So that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, I definitely feel that, like being able to see things from different perspectives. Yeah, when you can kind of take a step back, right? When you're not in the like overwhelm and the, oh my gosh, there's so much happening. You can take a step back and you're like, oh, I can actually now see, like just pausing, taking a breath, you can kind of see the perspectives.
Yeah.
And the other piece with Gemini is I brought in like, it can be like that social energy. It can be like a chatty energy. So definitely like reaching out to friends and maybe like a friend that you haven't talked to in a bit, like, right, you can have those conversations can be really insightful during Gemini season. Like go get dinner with a friend, right? Like go out with a group. Like that's a beautiful time to do it because the insights will be even deeper. And with that said, knowing that it's all a balance, right? And we all need time and space to ourselves, it can also be a really great time to journal and to take some of those time, because I feel like there's so much busyness with Gemini season. There's so many thoughts and there's so much happening or can be happening, that talking to friends can be one way to kind of like, right, it can kind of help to get things out. And then when you speak it, you're like, oh, helps me settle it. But also whether that's journaling or just taking some time for yourself to like get the thoughts out in a way, can be really helpful too during this Gemini season. So again, that's May 20th through the end of June. So we're in that for about a month.
Go Gemini. Happy birthday to all of our Geminis also.
Yeah. Happy birthday, Geminis. Awesome. I love it. So yeah, so now that we've kind of set the stage as we move through Gemini season. So we're recording this on May 23rd. So we're a couple days into Gemini season. But I thought just to mention May 22nd, Mercury, who is retrograde, moved into Taurus. So moved backwards into Taurus. Mercury started his retrograde in Gemini. And when planets are retrograde, they move backwards through the zodiac. So Mercury just entered Taurus, which I feel like is probably a supportive time during Mercury retrograde to have a little more groundedness and like a little more, because Mercury retrograde is a time to observe and go within and like observe what has been coming up for us. And so bringing it into Taurus feels like there will be a little bit more clarity in what we've been experiencing the past few weeks.
Absolutely. And with that Mercury shifting into Taurus the day before, Mercury cazimied the sun. And we've talked about that before, Mercury moving into the heart of the sun and there being this deep clarity with it. You can check out our Mercury retrograde podcast. I don't know what episode that is off the top of my head, but it's called Mercury retrograde. I'm sure you can find it. And then the other thing that also happened the day that Mercury cazimied the sun was that Mercury conjuncted Hecate. So this is their second conjunction. And their last conjunction was once again the waning moon in Taurus. And for those of you that follow me on Guidely, if you don't, here's an invitation to join Guidely. It is free. Join me in the archetypal astrology group. I find little tidbits like Mercury and Hecate conjuncting, and then there's turkey in the tree in the backyard talking to the waning moon. Because, you know, the turkey is earthly abundance and community. And it was literally in a tree communicating to the waning moon, which is Hecate. And then we ran into the turkey again this weekend. We haven't seen it since it was in the tree, and we ran into it again. So those nice little, you can't make it up coincidence. And Mercury and Hecate will conjunct one more time once he turns retrograde and passes over her direct. So there is this deepening into the communication we have with the medicine that we each carry that is so needed right now.
Yeah.
And
that was episode 20 for those who want to go back and listen to the Mercury retrograde podcast. Because we go into the full cycle of Mercury, so you get a kind of good idea of that cycle. And also Hecate has been coming up, that she's a goddess of the crossroads. So I feel like she's a good like energy to tune into when you're kind of feel like you're at a crossroads and you're not sure you can't really see what comes next. You're really, you know you can't go backwards, and you're not so sure about, what next step to take. I love the words that are coming is like almost saying like a prayer, show me the way, because we can't really see so far in front of us. But when we just kind of sit with, I don't really know, right? Like I have some ideas I would love, but she's a really beautiful energy to tune into when we're feeling a bit just in the middle. Like we're just feeling like we're in the middle of, this little crossroads and we're not sure what to do next.
And that Cazimi with Hecate involved all happened at 0 degrees of Gemini. So there's this initiatory energy. And so Hecate is moving in Gemini with the sun, this fast paced, kind of calling up of our medicine, it feels like in a faster way than has happened previously.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of fast moving things. So we talked
Mhm.
about Gemini season. Also, the planets are going to be shifting. We're going to get into a few more. So we had Mercury shifting. Also, Mars and Venus are shifting with all within a few days of each other. And so we have that shifting. We have Jupiter in Aries. Mars is going to be moving into Aries in his home sign. So we'll go through the specifics, but just to say, just, take home message of all of that is there's a lot of shifting, and there's a lot of shifting into Aries is like the sign of Aries is expanding because Jupiter's there, and Aries is an initiatory kind of like spark, new beginning energy. So there's a lot of shifting with Gemini season. There's a lot of shifting of the planets. And then there's this expansion of the energy of Aries, which is new beginnings.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of that kind of like rebirth energy, that new energy, and the shifting that comes with it. Because yeah, whenever we're moving into something new, it's a change, right? There's a lot of shifting. So just kind of like an overall like end of May theme is there's a lot shifting and changing. And so that brings us to May 24th is the day that Mars enters Aries. So Mars is coming home to his home sign of Aries. And Mars himself, he activates whatever he touches. And so he's activating this energy of Aries that Jupiter moved into on May 10th. So Jupiter again brings expansion. So there's been this kind of expansion of taking action and moving forward. But I also feel like it's not until the end of the month that Mars and Jupiter meet up that I feel like it kind of really like opens up. So we're kind of just like walking our way towards that energy. And again, that Jupiter's there for like about a year in total. So it's Jupiter is a longer transit, but we get Mars moving into Aries on May 24th. So I feel like there is this spark, this initiatory energy, because he's home. Also, Mars is happy in Aries, so he gets to really like get stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And we had a very interesting Aries season because it felt for a lot of people like the wheels were spinning. Like we wanted to go do stuff, but with Pisces being really loaded, which is very watery and kind of doing its own thing. It's taking salt baths. And then we had a lot of stuff in Taurus, which is this one step at a time kind of plotting. For Aries season, up until now, it has really felt like this wheel spinning. And as pieces have shifted out of Pisces into Aries, out of Taurus into Gemini, it's like we're starting to move, like the Aries energy that we've been carrying, and it's just kind of been at this hum as it's been getting ready to go. Yeah. And now that Mars has come home, he's like, okay, and now we're going to go. Like Venus moved in, and it was like the boss got back from vacation and she had her lists and she had all of the stuff, and she was doing the preparatory work for Mars to show up and activate it. Well, he's going to meet Jupiter in a few days, and there's going to be this expansion of the activation. So it really does almost feel like Aries season, the action and the activation and the go of Aries season is happening in conjunction with Gemini season. Like there's been enough shift to like, and we're going now because we've got Mars in a cardinal and the sun in this mutable. So there can be much more change and much more shifting now that we've like de-weighted Taurus with its like, fixed, we're staying here. And Pisces with its watery do-ness. That's the official do-ness.
Yeah, it was an interesting shift. What it felt like to me was, it definitely felt like Aries season wasn't so much about the doing and the action that it can be, that it was, for me, what I saw was like the dreams got clearer. like it had that Pisces, that big Pisces energy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a shift in like, okay, like there is some clarity and some action that I can see will be taken, but it was like the
Mm-hmm.
clarity in the dreams, but it wasn't like totally boots on the ground. I found Taurus to be like the boots on the ground, like trial and error, like we're gonna try things. And then Gemini season, I can kind of feel, and we'll see, because we never know, but I can
Mm-hmm.
feel that too. Like you said, there's more of that Aries activation energy with Jupiter and Mars. Stuff has moved out of Pisces for the most part, and we are now shifting into this. Now it's time to take the forward action movements. We're up till this point. That's kind of how it felt to me, was like the dreams that got clearer. Then it was like trial and error of Taurus season. And now it's like, okay, the activation, the insights, the inspiration that Gemini season can bring, because it's an air sign, in conjunction with that Aries energy, feels
Mm-hmm.
like more things we'll be able to see, like our little humans, will be able to see more tangible pieces happening in Gemini. And at least that's what
Absolutely.
I was kind of feeling. Yeah, and it's always interesting to see how it shows up for you, right? So that's kind of just been my experience. And I think that's the beauty of this is like the forecast. It's like the weather, it's the theme, and then you get to see how it shows up for you in your life, right? And that's always the kind of take that we have with astrology. It's like, we don't know, but here's the forecast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Love it.
Fabulous. What are we
So
doing next?
So the end of May, so we have May 28th, another shift is Venus moves into Taurus. So we've had, within a couple of days, we've had Mercury moved backwards into Taurus. We have Aries moving into, Mars moving into Aries, and then Venus moving into Taurus. So, right, like all within a week, we have like shifting and coming from different directions, because Mercury is coming on the back end of Taurus, Venus is coming on the front end of Taurus, Mars coming into Aries, right? So you can just feel like there's a lot of shifting.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so May 28th, Venus enters Taurus and she'll be home. So we have Mars home in Aries, Venus home in Taurus. And to me, these two, they're personal planets, they're close to us, right? When we feel into like they're next to us and next to the earth, close to the earth, that they affect us. And so that these two energies that represent that taking action, and the Venus like receiving, and that kind of Venusian sensual energy, and then the Mars being our desires too, and that forward energy, you can feel when they're both home, kind of feels like, oh, this is actually like the perfect energy for doing that. And maybe this is why like things haven't felt like they're totally landed, because we were actually waiting for this like really beautiful energy, for
Mm-hmm.
it to be this balanced energy. So yeah, so Venus moves into Taurus on the 28th. Right before she moves into Taurus, though, she makes a square with Pluto. And these two have been aspecting each other through her retrograde, which happened going a while back. But I feel like there's just more to unfold with the story of Venus and Pluto, like getting really real with the way that we value ourselves and our self-worth. And Pluto brings a depth. He brings like, we're going to bring the truth of how we really feel. And so that's an aspect that happens right before she moves. So right before she moves into Taurus, she has this activation with Pluto. That is, it's a square, so it might feel challenging to us. It might be like, pay attention to your triggers around that time, like what is triggering you, especially in relationship or in life, because that aspect of Venus and Pluto, when they dance together, usually brings up some stuff. So that's going to happen right before she moves into Taurus. So it almost kind of feels like kind of those last bits that we need to see with the Venus and Aries before she goes home, before she can like be in that receptive, open place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. She's also going to have a brief meetup with Mercury. She is moving No, I'm sorry. They're Mercury is going to trine Pluto. Venus is going to square Pluto, and then Venus is going to move. So there's going to be this Pluto activation, like Alexis was talking about, that this trine with Mercury, keeping in mind that Mercury and Pluto are both retrograde. They're both in Earth signs when this happens. And Venus rules Taurus. So there is a lot of energy around this that is earthy and sensual. And like Alexis said, like self-worth is really the thing that seems to be pinging for me also is dealing with the reality of your self-worth. As Venus moves home. And we've got Mars and Venus both moving home, which moves them out of the mutual reception that they were in, while Venus was in Aries and Mars was in Pisces. They were doing a dance of mutual reception where they could act like the other one. But now they're both home. They're both feeling comfortable.
They will both be home. And I had to mute because the garbage truck was driving by, and I was just laughing at that because that, it feels like also like Pluto is like excavating and like getting deep. And so I feel like before Venus moves into Taurus, it was just like another message of like, yeah, there's gonna be some like taking out the trash and like letting go of the stuff that actually isn't true. And it's not actually, it can be just beliefs we have about ourselves, the way we talk to ourselves. Like there's just that last bit of like just taking out the trash. So I love that.
And keeping in mind, we're still releasing from the Scorpio, full moon eclipse that happened on the 15th, 16th, adjust for your time zone. We're still in that releasing period until we get to the new moon on the 30th. So we are still taking out the trash. We are in a waning moon, and we're releasing what is left and ready. Because of course, everything is a constantly evolving spiral process. We bump up against it over and over and over again, hopefully from a different position on the spiral. We hope we're bumping up against it from a different position on the spiral. So there will always be stuff to take out. But right now, we've got stuff sitting at our doors ready to be moved out of the house.
Yeah. And like I said, we've probably been working through this stuff for a while, maybe even since the Venus retrograde. And it's just time for like those final pieces to go. And just before that new moon at the end of the month, we have Mars conjunct Jupiter in Aries. So Jupiter moved into Aries on May 10th. But like I said, I feel like it doesn't really get activated until Mars comes over and they meet up. So on May 29th, the day before the new moon, so this feels very much, they'll basically be in conjunction for the new moon. This feels like a big energy for that new moon, which Aries is new. It's like the first sign in the zodiac, it's new beginnings, and a new moon is a new beginning. And we're coming out of this eclipse full moon, which is a bigger, like you said, we're still in the waning, releasing energy of that. And because it's an eclipse, it's a bigger energy, like more that we're releasing. And so this new moon feels like an even bigger new beginning because it's the first new moon after the eclipses, right? It's like, okay, we went through that, big eclipse season, and now we have this new beginning, and it has Mars and Jupiter activating each other in Aries, really setting off that energy, really setting off Jupiter's kind of, energy for the next year, that he's going to be expanding this energy of stepping into the new, of activating, of taking action, right? Of like taking those next steps, listening for and taking the next steps that we need. So that happens basically, right alongside that new moon that happens on the 29th. And then May 30th, we have our new moon in Gemini, which happens 7:30 a.m. Eastern time. And that's at 9 degrees of Gemini. So take a look at your chart, see what you have going on around 9 degrees of Gemini, or aspecting. And I kind of love that it's a new moon, and then it has around the same time that Mars Jupiter conjunction, right? Lots of new energy, it feels like.
Yeah. It feels like really juicy potentiality.
Potentiality. That's a good one. Write that in your calendar next to the new moon. New moon in Gemini on May 30th. Juicy potentiality. That's good. So that's kind of how we close out May, which I think is a beautiful way to kind of move into June. We also, the very beginning of June, we get Mercury stationing direct. So on June 3rd, Mercury ends his retrograde, which I think many people will be happy for, because, you know, he retrogrades 3 times a year. It's not anything to like be super worried about. You know, some people are like, oh, Mercury retrograde. But I do find that people, you know, tend to like when Mercury is direct. Things tend to go a little bit smoother, tend to like when Mercury is direct. So that happens on June 3rd. Again, he's in Taurus. So he'll still be in his shadow for a few weeks after that, until about June 18th. But we get some of the forward motion. We get some of the, you know, the clarity and the, you know, we're able to kind of take that last pass, because that's what, as he moves direct, he's going to be moving over where he's traveled during his retrograde. So we get that kind of third pass, like, oh, from this perspective, now I can see what happened, what I went through. Oh, okay, I get it, right? So that's what we have to look forward to after Mercury stations direct. And then the next day, Saturn stations retrograde. So there's kind of a switch happening. Now, Saturn is not as close to us. He's not as personal as Mercury. So the outer planets, we don't feel the retrogrades in the same way. But what I do think this will bring up is just like a, little note from Saturn, kind of like, let's go back and look at what we've been going through for the past 2 years. Because Saturn is in Aquarius and he is the builder. He's a planet of mastery. So we've been mastering this area in our chart of Aquarius. So I always find it interesting to like, what house is Aquarius for people? Like, is it in your house of career? Is it in your house of home? It is in your house of relationship? Like, what area is being revolutionized and coming into like a more tangible reality, so that you can come to mastery in that area of your life. And so even if you don't know what house it is, you can probably feel like there's an area of your life for the past 2 years that's really been getting kind of shifted and expanded. And so I feel like when Saturn goes retrograde, it's kind of like a note, because we have just about less than a year, right? So he's in the end of Aquarius. So this is like, if you were to say beginning, middle, end, he's in that end, like really moving into the mastery. I feel like the beginning part of it did not feel like mastery. The beginning of Saturn in Aquarius was like, WTF, what is going on?
It's like a season of, it was the closeout of the dumpster fire. 2020.
Yeah, right. It was in 2020. So we got like, he dipped in March through July of 2020, like feel into March through July of 2020. Right. And then he officially moved in December of 2020. So like, yeah, that was a whole bunch of like rugs getting pulled out from under us. Like, just Saturn really did a job there at the beginning of his stay in Aquarius. Right. And Aquarius is about revolutionizing things. So yeah, it didn't feel so, you know, none of us knew what was going on. We were just like, oh my God. Right.
Yes, and it was a lot of Bitmoji dumpster fires with the soda and the straw. Like, it was a lot of that.
Pretty much. Oh my God, exactly that. And then we moved into the middle phase where we're like, all right, well, we're going to try to put the pieces back together. Like, try to like, you know, build some stuff, because he's a carpenter builder archetype as well. So it was kind of, that was the middle stage. And then this last stage, I feel like, is moving into the mastery. Where it's like, okay, we've been in this for 2 years. We have the perspective. We've been able to see the things. So I feel like Saturn stationing retrograde on June 4th is just bringing us more awareness, just bringing us like, hey, don't forget about me. Don't forget, like, we've been, not that you can forget because you're in it and you live it, but we've been working on this thing. So let's just, right, like, know that we're moving towards this final piece, because he'll shift out of Aquarius March 2023. So we have a little less than a year of this final stage of Saturn. So I just love, yeah, I think that's a really beautiful, like feel into like the beginning of that, the middle of that, and where you're at now. So
Oh, it's so different. Like it is, I look at my life and I'm like, it is so different.
yeah.
And it's so much better. There's so
Right.
much more spaciousness. There's so much more clarity. And it may not be long-term clarity, but it's presence. And that presence and the clarity in the presence matters so much more than our long-term clarity, because the only thing we're guaranteed is this moment and that we will die. So to shift out of playing the survival mode game and to recognize that it is a game, because the one thing that we all know is we're not getting out of this alive. So our presence in this moment, and, speaking as an Aries sun who is very capable of like not being able to tell you what I had for breakfast because I'm so in what I'm doing right now, that presence is invaluable because it is our only gift. It's the only thing we have. So just really being with it and being curious.
Yeah. And I love that you said it's even better. Like, I think that's the beauty of Saturn is he creates from a foundation that sets you up for things that are even better. And people always associate Saturn with that, the beginning phase of Saturn, because it's like, he gets a bad rap because it can feel like the rug is getting pulled up for you. It can feel like WTF, but Saturn really is about like setting us up for what we truly want. Yeah. And so I think that's the beauty when you can kind of see now that we've, you can look back and you can really see it like this Saturn and Aquarius like stint, like you can really see it pretty clear, like the progression of Saturn through the sign, that you can come into appreciation for Saturn. Yeah. You can come into this like, oh yeah, like that coming into that mastery is a process that you start out knowing nothing. You start out completely feeling like, right, like this is never going to work. Like I can't even imagine. And that's the beauty that Saturn creates. So just want to give a little like shout out to Saturn as he stations direct, because who knows what he'll bring up for us, right? And like, who knows? Yeah. And that perspective of like, okay, this isn't to make me miserable. This is to like really bring me into that final stage. Yeah.
I love me some Saturn.
Yeah.
Takes some work to get to really loving Saturn. As Alexis has witnessed.
Oh yeah.
The Saturn. And Saturn has that bad rap of the constriction and the cold and the repression. And when you are doing your Saturn, when you're working with him, he'll build whatever structure you ask. He'll build it. His job isn't to design it. That's your job. He will build it. He will make it happen for you. And I can imagine this, but I'm willing to accept even better.
And that's a beautiful part of like, what are you designing? What are your thoughts? Like your thoughts are constantly, right? I've been very like into the gene keys lately, and the whole idea that like epigenetics basically scientifically proves, which I love that we have science to like prove these things now, that our environment affects our genes. It can literally turn on or off our gene expression. And so the fact that like our thoughts and our environment is affecting, like, what are you designing? What are you believing? Because that is what's going to be built. Yeah. And yeah, I think all of these themes are going to be coming up as we move into that Saturn retrograde space. So yeah, again, that's June 4th, and he'll be retrograde for quite a bit. So.
And if anybody wants a very ground level biology 101 book about how our belief affects it turns on and off our DNA, I would suggest reading Dr. Bruce Lipton's book. It's called The Biology of Belief. And he does a beautiful job of explaining it on like a butter and olive sandwich level. Of how our cellular receptors work in our cell membranes. And and the importance of it. It's a very 101 book. And it's great. And it really touches into what Alexis was saying, that our environment and our belief system is what activates our genes.
Yeah.
And I love it. And it's juicy.
It's powerful.
So good. Good.
So keep that in mind as you're moving through the beginning of June. And then on June 11th, we have Venus conjunct Uranus. So I feel like this is a big activator in like, okay, so you say you want these things, and sure, you say that you believe these things. Is it embodied? And do you really? And it's going to ignite these parts of us that what I feel like it's really doing is opening us to receive even more. Because Uranus is this like revolutionary, he's the energy of like awakening, and he's coming into conjunction with Venus, who's about receiving and our self-worth. And so as those two come together, whenever anytime anything like, you know, aspects Uranus, it's always like you never know what you're gonna get. It's kind of like that lightning bolt of like, right, just unexpected things can happen. But I feel like you know, that's kind of what's coming, is this opening us to receive even more. And so whatever is coming up around those few days, really even that week around June 11th, just take note, because it feels like there's an important piece there. Also, the fact that Uranus rules Aquarius. So I feel like there's some tie-in there to what we're building with Saturn, that there's some piece here to really like pay attention to that supports that kind of, you know, everything we were talking about with building, what we're designing. That feels like an important time period to really be aware of our thoughts, to really be aware of our beliefs, as that gets activated with Venus and Uranus on June 11th.
Yeah. And I think for Venus and Uranus, the two kind of phrases that come to mind is, you know, embodied belief. So back again to the biology of belief and what we're activating through how we envision our lives, how we envision ourselves, how we work with the world, biology of belief, Dr. Bruce Lipton. So this embodied belief piece with Venus and Uranus coming together. And the other piece is this revolutionary receptivity. Like, how do we revolutionize that? And with Saturn being retrograde, this is a chance to review and renovate any structures that we have that don't allow for embodied, you know, belief or revolutionary receptivity. Because we do have this beautiful opportunity as a whole to go through this upgrade. We're being called upward. And we don't tend to talk a lot about it because it's, you know, it's about 140 years off, but the age of Aquarius is about to start. From a galactic perspective, 140 years is the last 5 minutes of the movie. And we're in these waves of the age of Aquarius coming in heavier than it's ever come in. And the age of Pisces is dwindling. And so how do we revolutionize our ability to receive all of the good? You know, we are children of divinity. We're children of source, and we've chosen this embodied experience as souls to fully experience the owner operator part of having a meat suit. And I love my meat suit. I have fun in my meat suit. It provides me so many opportunities and to feel and to do the human piece of this. And so our ability to receive is really tied in to this embodied belief of what we're capable of.
Yeah, the image I just keep getting is just like letting more soul in, like just letting more of who we really are. We just, you know, we only can see and sense a fraction of it, but letting more of ourselves in is kind of, like the image that was coming with that Venus Uranus piece. And I love those words. Yeah. Embodied belief. And yeah, I think again, like I said, it ties into that whole week, really that whole beginning of June feels like a lot of this, like we're going to be in it. And especially because right, that's the date, but it's, these things they lead up to, and they meet, and then there's still a unfolding, right? And then just 2 days later, Mercury enters Gemini. So he's still in that, she's still traversing the path that he traveled during his retrograde. He'll be in a shadow for another couple of days after that. But now we get Mercury home in Gemini, and this time he's direct, and he's like, done with his retrograde. So I think that will bring more insights and more, different perspectives. And also, because we're coming out of the retrograde and he's going to be ending his shadow on June 18th, we're going to really be coming from this, we've traversed this space over those few weeks, and now we're really coming into this understanding of what we've been through. And so I think that whole period, the beginning into the middle of June, it just feels like a very insightful time, like just a time to just really have that, be able to take that step back, give yourself that perspective, which I think is why having conversations with friends, journaling, like giving yourself that space will really, really help to ground all that's happening around this time.
And Mercury moving into Gemini means all three personal planets are home. Mars is in Aries, Venus is in Taurus, Mercury is in Gemini. Saturn is one of the rulers of Aquarius, and while he is retrograde, he's still at home. Neptune rules Pisces. He's at home. That's five bodies that are in their home signs. Did I miss anybody?
I think that's it, but especially the personal planets. That's to have all the personal planets home. Like, I can't remember. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's happened, but I can't remember. So that's a big deal to have Mercury, Venus, and Mars home. And then, to have Jupiter home, who also is about higher consciousness, right? Like, we have the personal planets who are like, we're doing all the human stuff, like getting all the insights on a human level. And then also like Neptune being home in Pisces is like also like the higher consciousness, and the like that higher self part of us is also right getting kind of like, all right, ready to go. And so having all of those home, I think I'll look at a chart, but I think that's
I know Mars was last home in March of 2020 was the last time that Mars was home in Aries. So it's been
5. You were right, the 5. That's
And that having those personal planets home with, the higher consciousness of Neptune home, and Aquarius who wants Saturn and Aquarius who wants to revolutionize how we're going to build our lives, because how we're building our inner lives is directly reflected in how we're building our outer lives. Something I've certainly been speaking about a lot for those that have been following is, I'm going to date myself. I grew up watching the Jetsons. The idea that we could have a phone call where I'm seeing you and you're seeing me, and we're talking in real time, was mind blowing for those of us who grew up with a phone that was attached to the wall via a cord. And we're living in someone else's imagination. Automobiles, someone else's imagination. I read this morning, Elon Musk wants to put a colony of human beings on Mars by 2029. Someone else's imagination. I remember watching Total Recall as a child. Anybody else? Like, we constantly have an opportunity to imagine the world. And just because something exists right now doesn't mean it always existed, and doesn't mean it needs to continue to exist. We can imagine the things that don't work right out of this world. Bye-bye.
Yeah. And just the pace that things are moving. The fast pace, like seeing how things have gone from literally like, a phone that's like attached, and that was the only way that you could, connect with someone, or pagers, right? Remember pagers? And then but it wasn't that instant like access. You didn't have access to things. And then moving through like dial up and the excitement, but it was like, felt like, looking back, like that feels so ancient, like dial up internet, like what? And like now it's like, I literally pick up my phone. It's like, doop, there we go. Like I have everything at my fingertips. Like the pace that it has moved so fast. is really just, I think, speaks to the age of technology that we're in.
Mhm.
The fact that it really is a beautiful tool that, yeah, you have to have boundaries with it. It can be a headache.
Yeah.
It can be very intense. We're living in a very like, there's a lot going on right now, right? Like,
Mhm.
I think if there was like a, if you could time travel, take someone from like 1900 and like drop them in right now, their
Mhm.
nervous systems would freak out because of all that's going, how fast things are, like, right, like just thinking about that shift. And we've also come into it pretty
Mhm.
fast,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Mhm. I know that we're going to end the year with Mars retrograde in Gemini. Now, the last time Mars went retrograde in Gemini, the World Wide Web was born. Like, and when you take that into account, like how revolutionary that has been, I had a conversation with my child this weekend. He's like, "What do you mean there was no internet shopping when you were little?" And we were trying to explain to him like Oregon Trail and how, like, for those of us who grew up with that, which was like pixels on a screen. And the idea for him that you couldn't just go online and have Amazon drop something off at your house 2 days later, a day later, so you could have some dominoes to play with. He can't wrap his head around it. And I am really curious to see what Mars and Gemini at the end of this year is going to birth. And of course, we're not going to see it at the end of this year because birthing is a process. But the last time Mars was in Gemini, the World Wide Web was birthed. And when you take in the implications of that, Saturn in Aquarius is busy building innovation, supporting what is going to be Mars retrograde in Gemini, new ideas and the ability to zip around and move fast and socially connect. So I think you can't make it up. And it just feels so beautiful. Like what all of this, back to Venus conjuncting Uranus, this revolutionary receptivity. What can we open to by shifting our beliefs?
yeah. Yeah, and just to bring it back, so that Mars in Gemini was the last time Mars was retrograde in Gemini, was what you're speaking of, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, with all of these people, with our homey personal planets at home.
Well, it's fascinating too, because if you think about Gemini is about communication, interaction,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it makes
Yep.
sense. Like the internet literally revolutionized that. And so Mars, right, brings this ignition. And so it
Mm-hmm.
will be very interesting to see what happens, what unfolds, because especially with with the technology that we have set up right now, it's like, oh, well, what else can, right? What
Mm-hmm.
else can happen from there?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's not the internet. Maybe it's not, right? Like we don't
Mm-hmm.
know. So yeah, that's a very interesting piece. And yeah, we'll definitely, as the year goes, we'll get more into Mars retrograde, because I've had my eye on that's a big
Mm-hmm.
to the end of this year for
Yeah.
sure. So as we move through mid-June, we have a full moon in Sagittarius. So on June 14th, so the day after that Mercury shifts into Gemini, we have a full moon in Sagittarius, 23 degrees of Sagittarius, which also is that like looking at things, like it has that explorer, like looking at things from a higher point of view. And it's also squaring Neptune. We have a child who's needing some.
Sorry. My computer screen's shaking wildly. That was the kid, not the cat this time. Full moon, Sagittarius, 23 degrees.
Sagittarius, 23 degrees. Yeah, and it's also squaring Neptune. And Sagittarius can be about like also living into what we've imagined, like living into it's like this higher perspective. This, I think of, because Gemini is the sign often associated with like learning and a student and curiosity. Sagittarius is the sign of like the explorer, the philosopher, or the teacher. And so there's this higher perspective that we can reach with Sagittarius, but it still to me has this exploratory, like we never reach an end. We are never like, I'm a teacher and I know all, right? Like that just is not a thing, because we are continually evolving. And so it has that flavor, but it still has an exploratory flavor to me. It's a mutable fire sign. And so having a full moon in that feels like, right, there's just like more to the story to unfold, more for us to explore. And then it's also squaring Neptune. So we talked about Neptune can be associated with higher consciousness. So I have a feeling there's going to be some challenges there of like, where can't we see what is possible? Where can't we see kind of around the corner of like what we're actually capable of? And Neptune can also be about like numbing out and putting a veil over things. So are we, reaching for the Netflix or reaching for, some other substance to kind of like just mute things? And this is not a time to mute things. This is a time to really be like open to possibilities. So yeah, so again, that's June 14th, full moon in Sagittarius.
Yeah. And keeping in mind, like bringing in the messy side of Neptune, if we add that messy side of Neptune to a messy side of Sagittarius, which is the forgetting that just because that teacher mastery has been reached, that there's always more. Like Pluto whispering in our ears that there's always more. The messy side of Sagittarius is needing to be right all the time. So when you add that in, squaring Neptune, just be aware that squares can be conflicting hard energy. And so to really be self-aware of how you're handling and where you may be getting stuck in the numbing out of Neptune or the I am right of Sagittarius, so that you're moving into the higher place of curiosity and that mystical shamanic energy of Neptune.
Yeah, curiosity definitely feels like the medicine there, helping through that full moon. And there can also be beautiful insights and inspirations, but yeah, curiosity for sure. And it's right in the energy of this really big. So on June 16th, we have like 3 big transits. I think like Gemini season is going out with a bang, because on June 16th, so just 2 days after the full moon, we have, I'm just going to say it all and then we'll break it down, because like just listen to it and just feel into like all of it. We have the Sun trine Saturn at 25 degrees of Aquarius, and the Sun is in Gemini. So the Sun trine Saturn. We also have the Sun square Neptune in Pisces, 25 degrees of Pisces. And then Venus conjunct the North Node at 22 degrees of Taurus. And they're all in aspect to each other. So all of this, right, it's like this big like pot of like all of these archetypal energies aspecting each other in different ways. And so if the North Node is involved, the South Node is involved.
Yep.
So there's a lot of energies there. So we'll go through them each, we'll start with the Sun trine Saturn, or maybe just talking overall, like how they play into each other. But we have the Sun, Saturn, Neptune, Venus, and the nodes. Like it's a lot of energy coming off of that full moon. And as this being like kind of like the end of, the Sun is in the end of Gemini. It's almost just like fireworks of like all this stuff, right? All of this stuff like being activated. And it might not feel like joyful fireworks. It may feel like just what is going on? Like I just feel like, wow, like I feel off because it's just, there's something, right? It can feel a million different ways, but just knowing that there's this, that's what I'm seeing is like fireworks.
Yeah.
Just a lot being activated, within us. So yeah, we have the Sun trine Saturn, who's retrograde, who we talked about as like moving into mastery. So I think the Sun is bringing illumination to this area for us, and it's in a trine, so it's supportive. So it's like, hey, like, Saturn went retrograde on June 4th. So we've had, little less than 2 weeks of the beginning of Saturn retrograde. So it feels like the sun is bringing some helpful information here, some like helpful illuminations, but the sun is also squaring Neptune. So there can be some challenges. I think that message from the full moon like definitely plays into this as well, of to not numb out, to really just be self-aware, to really be in that curiosity, because the sun squaring Neptune can kind of bring in some of those challenging aspects of like, I don't really truly like the places where we don't truly believe things are possible. So that's kind of what I'm feeling with the sun Saturn Neptune piece, because the sun is in a harmonious trine to Saturn, but it's in a square to Neptune. So there's just some interesting pieces with the sun illuminating some stuff. And I think coming off of that full moon, it all plays into each other, right? I'm just seeing this like pot of like all this stuff just being stirred up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love the helpful illumination. Because Saturn is retrograde. And so with a retrograde, we oftentimes there's this triple opportunity is how I often feel a retrograde. Like he's moved over things once to kind of show us. And now we're reviewing, we're going backwards, and we're doing potential renovations on and a deeper dive on what was shown to us with the first pass. So having the sun be there in this supportive trine, illuminating what we're reviewing before we really dive into the building process, which is going to happen once Saturn turns direct again. We've got some time on that. There's going to be some time with this review period. So we don't have to necessarily take action. But it's almost like this illumination of the mastery potential, because we're looking at the plans again. For anybody who's ever built a house, they bring you the plans, you look at the plans, they go, it's a lot of back and forth. The same with like legal documents, a lot of back and forth. You're reviewing it. And the sun is going to come in and bring the illumination. It's going to be helpful. It's like a light saying like, hey, just so you know, there's really wonderful mastery potential here. There's the possibility for mastery. Can you see these things that may trip you up? Can you see these things that are holding you back? You know, how do we help shine a light on this so we feel less like we're stumbling around in the dark, and knowing also that we don't get to see to the end, like back to that Hecate piece where we get to see the next right step. We get to see the next best step. We don't get to see the end of the journey, but we get to see a little ways down the various paths. And then we can make a choice from there. And I love the sun square Neptune, like looking at where do you doubt? Where do your doubts lie? How do you make yourself small because you doubt? How do you attach to somebody else's mission rather than your own mission? So, and Venus conjunct the North Node just feels so earthy. And like this nodal axis for me really feels about the healing of bringing in our embodied creativity and the sensuality that is possible when we're embodied, living in ourselves and feeling all of it.
Yeah, I love all of it. It feels like the like overall kind of like the overarching feeling is like, here's the potential. Do you believe it? And can you embody it?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, that's all happening on the same day.
Yes.
And knowing that, right? Like that these things will feel for days after and before, but like it's all those aspects are happening on that day. Like that's why I think it got illuminated for me of like, oh, this is a potent day, June 16th here. And the days around that. But yeah, and there's also that trust with Neptune.
Mm-hmm.
You have to really lean into trust other than what you can physically see. Trust in even in yourself. Like you can trust in like, oh, like I've like look at all that I've gone through in life. Look at all that I've made,
Mhm.
work in life, and that has gotten me where I am. I can trust in myself. Like I
Yeah.
actually, right, like give myself credit, and trusting in that which we can't see, trusting in the unseen, trusting in that higher part
Mhm.
of ourselves that is not our human who like wants all the, the details. And
Yeah.
then I think that embodiment with the North Node is really
Oh,
important,
yeah.
because the North Node always challenges us. It always brings us into um, this, like the edge of our comfort zone,
Mhm.
right? And so it's going to bring us there, because that's how we move into our potential, is we
Mhm.
kind of push the edges of what we know. And so, yeah, I think just knowing that that's all happening that day can be helpful, just to be like, oh, okay,
Mm.
like yeah, there's a lot happening here, a lot shifting here, and that's how Gemini season is kind of like going out with a bang. um right, like take it
Mhm.
slow, just like have that marked, like okay, this day, or around this day is just a time when, yeah, it's all really, when you can take a step back, it's all for that higher potential,
Yeah.
right? Like what is possible. And when you can lean back into that, you don't get so caught up in um, the little challenges that come up, because you
Mhm.
can see it like there's a bigger purpose for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to bring those questions in for everyone again, here, here's the potential. Do you believe it? And can you embody it? And just, make a note. Here's the potential. Do you believe it? Can you embody it? I think that's so concise and beautiful.
I love it. And that's pretty much how we wrap up Gemini season, because then we have on June 21st, the sun enters Cancer, and we'll be moving into Cancer season. So you can feel there's a lot shifting and changing in Gemini season. There's just a lot of, right, like a
Mhm.
lot of good stuff happening, and a lot of like insights and inspiration happening, if you allow yourself to listen and to be in that curious place,
Mhm.
and also like not holding too tightly to any plans that you may have, because I have a feeling that Gemini season is just gonna like kind of throw up some new ideas, some new insights,
Right.
maybe turn you a different direction. Not like a full, like, right, if you feel into that Saturn mastery, like it's not like we're throwing the whole plan out, but maybe we're going to be shifting a little bit
Yeah.
different than we expected. And that, I think, to embrace that during Gemini season, um, yeah, you'll definitely make it through a little bit smoother if you can embrace that curiosity.
Absolutely. And for anybody who wants to really lean into here's the potential, do you believe it? Can you embody it? I have my final all gender inclusive kids welcome, 13 and up kids firewalk on June 18th to celebrate this shift into Cancer. That's the summer solstice here in the Northern Hemisphere. So that will be my final event that welcomes anybody other than female humans, because then I'm shifting to a lot of putting my time and energy into my women's groups, um so to bring that all in as we move into Cancer season. It's beautiful, and it does feel like kind of a wily month.
It does.
Fast moving Gemini.
Yeah, and I'll also mention, during Gemini season, I am opening mystery school, so the beginning of June. So if you want support on all of that, really, because we work deeply with embodied, ecstatic living, and the full potential of what like your gifts truly are. So you can check that out. We'll put the links to all of our stuff in the show notes. Um, but yeah, I think that's a piece too of like, reach out to the people who you
Mhm.
love, find the support that you need, give yourself the time and space, for the things that you're called to, the
Yeah.
things that excite you. And that's going to be really a beautiful medicine to move through Gemini season before we dip into the pool of Cancer season
All
towards
the
the end of June.
flow and emotion of Cancer. Absolutely. So thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe and share us with your friends. And until next time.